Hi, welcome to Itsy Bitsy's live read of An Independent Innocent by Meredith Bond, Chapter 1. Lady Victoria Barrett held her beautiful new painted fan in front of her face to hide her laughter. Her friend, Miss Penny Albright, simply laughed aloud, not caring who heard, but that it was Penny. "Oh, ripping good one, Lady Victoria," Lord Guilford said, smiling warmly at her. Lord Shepley had burst out laughing so loudly heads had turned in their direction, but Victoria was used to that. Usually it meant she and her friends would attract others to join, who would attract others who would want to join their circle. "Good evening, Mr. Crosby," shouldered his way between Penny and Lord Shipley. He looked as sweet as ever. His blond hair was like gold in the candlelight, and his summer blue eyes were smiling. It was really his round face, though, which gave him that sheriff look. Victoria cleared her throat to swallow her giggles and lowered her fan. "Good evening, sir. I do so hate to break up this jolly group, but I believe you have promised the next dance to me, Lady Victoria," he said, holding out his hand to her. "What? A second one?" Lord Chipley had said in mock affront. "You wouldn't allow me a second dance, Lady Victoria. I must object." Victoria just laughed. "That is because you asked too late, and I was already promised." "To Crosby?" Lord Guilford asked, looking over the man in question. "In that waistcoat?" Mr. Crosby was clearly insulted. With a tug on the offending article of clothing, he asked, "And what is wrong with my waistcoat? I think it's quite elegant." "Boring," declared Lord Guilford. "I disagree, my lord. It is elegant," Victoria rushed to assure him. "What do you think, Miss Albright?" She considered the simple navy blue garment. It was shot through with swirls of silver thread. "No, I must agree with Lord Guilford on this one. If it were red or a brighter blue, it would be more interesting." "But less elegant," Mr. Crosby countered. "Perhaps, but certainly more eye-catching." He frowned. "If I were going with eye-catching, I would have worn pink like Shepley here, but I wasn't," he finished with a satisfied look. "I say," Lord Shepley objected, but before he could continue, Mr. Crosby held out his hand once more, saying, "Lady Victoria, I do believe the dance is starting, if you will excuse us." Victoria took his hand and allowed him to lead her through the center of their little circle and out onto the floor. "Don't tell him I said so, but I have to agree. Lord Shepley's waistcoat is a little much," Victoria said after performing her curtsy to begin the country dance. Mr. Crosby gave her a happy smile. "I knew you had excellent taste." They they moved apart with the steps of the dance, but when they came back together, he said, "Your gown this evening is particularly becoming. The green of the embroidery brings out the beauty of your eyes." "Thank you, sir." She was pleased someone had noticed. She and her mother had spent ages with the modesty just looking for just the right shade of the green thread for the woman to use for the leaves that covered the bodice of her gown and then trailed prettily in a few stripes down the skirt. "Are you free for a drive in the park tomorrow?" he asked as they held hands and circled about. "If it were not raining, that is," he quickly added as they were forced to move apart. "It has been raining a great deal this season, hasn't it? But sadly, no, I am at home tomorrow. I do hope you will come." "Of course. So long as I get to spend time with you, I don't much care where we are." At that, Victoria could feel her face grow warm, and she didn't even try to stop the smile from spreading across her face. "I do so love your smile," he said. before releasing her to sashay around the gentleman next to him. "It brightens your whole countenance," he added, when she stood in front of him again. "Are you saying that my face is otherwise dull?" she asked, deliberately teasing him. He looked so horrified for a moment she couldn't help but laugh. "I am just funning, sir." The relief in his expression almost made her laugh again. "You are a cruel woman, my lady," he told her. "Yes, but you love me despite that." She battered her eyelashes at him, and this time it was he who laughed. "That I do." Victoria's heart shuddered, and it had nothing to do with the extortion of the dance. She deliberately kept their conversation light and meaningless for the remainder, but she could see the warmth in his eyes. Afterward, he walked her back to her mother when she pointed the lady out to him. She was standing with Lady Preston, and they both nodded approvingly when he bowed to them and then offered to fetch Victoria a glass of lemonade. "Thank you, sir." "I would appreciate that greatly," Victoria said. "You have done it again, Lady Victoria," Lady Preston said after the gentleman had walked off on his errand. "Done what, my lady?" Victoria asked when the woman didn't continue immediately. "Captured the attention of one of the most sought-after gentlemen of the season," the woman clarified. "I believe it is unheard of to do so 3 seasons in a row, and I was rather hoping to introduce Mr. Crosby to one of my clients." Oh, Victoria wasn't certain what to say to that. She quite liked Mr. Crosby, and surely her parents would not be able to find anything to object to should he propose to her. He was handsome, wealthy, and came from an excellent family. "We shall see what comes of this one," was all her mother said before the gentleman returned with Victoria's lemonade. Thomas Earl Brentwood sat at his desk, methodically working his way through the estate's accounts for the month, adding up numbers, calculating expenditures versus income. It was tedious work. Thank God, it only needed to be done once a month, but this was what came from merely jotting things down as they happened instead of keeping a running total. The knock on his door was welcome. "Come." 2 of his tenant farmers, Jack Harris and John Miller, came in, both holding their hats in their hands and looking very uncomfortable. Thom didn't wonder why. They never came to him. Usually it was he who went to them to see how things were getting on. This meant something was wrong. Thom stood and strode toward the bell. "Some ale, gentlemen?" They both stopped and looked at each other, clearly unsure whether it was polite to drink his lordship's ale or rude to refuse. Thom rang the bell, taking the decision for them. As he expected, Joseph, the footman who had likely shown the men in, came in a minute later, bearing a tray with 3 mugs of ale. They each took one. Thom lifted his to the men to an abundant crop. He was about to take a drink when he noticed his toast had only made the men look even more wretched. "Bloody hell, to your health," he tried again. This time, both men lifted their mugs and mumbled, "And yours," before drinking. Thom waited as the 2 men gulped down the ale. One stopped, lowering his mug while the other drained his. "What seems to be the problem?" Thom asked. He tried to keep his voice sounding concerned and in control. Harris, who had only drunk half his ale, set the mug down on a nearby table. "It's the fields, my lord." Miller wiped his sleeve across his mouth. "They're bogs," he added. "With the last big storm, the drainage system gave way," Harris said. Thom put his own mug down next to Miller's with a sigh. "I suppose this shouldn't come as a surprise. We've been repairing that system again and again for the past few years. Yes, my lord, but now it's well and gone, Harris said. Thom nodded. I probably should have replaced it last autumn. Mo- Nay, my lord, it were too wet last autumn. The spring would have been a better time, Miller said. Harris nodded his agreement. And since we didn't plant anything, yes, you were right, gentlemen. If only we'd known what shape it was in, I could have done so. Well, I suppose there's nothing to be done but replace the whole thing. Thom turned and went back to his account book to see if he had had enough cash on hand for such an expenditure. Don't need to replace all of it, Jack said. Just the part. No, Mr. Harris, I will not do the job by halves yet again. If you recall, that is what we did the year before last. This time, we'll replace the whole thing, and then we won't have to worry about it for many years to come, Thom said, cutting him off. The man pressed his lips together, but not happy. If no do that, my lord, then all of our farms will be underwater for this growing season at the least, Miller pointed out. I know, and I'm sorry for it, but it's better to do it all at one go. Thom stopped to think of what might be done for the men. Both they and their families relied on the income from the land to feed and clothe themselves. Thom just couldn't let them starve for however long this took. He made a quick decision. Until the drainage system is done, you both may count my acreage as your own, and as soon as your fields are ready for planting once more, you will return mine to me. That's very good of you, my lord, but then what'll we farm? Brentwood thought about this. He couldn't survive on the rents alone. Thom had his own farm that he counted on for income just as his tenants did. He turned and looked out the window. His steady face, his, his steady faced the back of the house, and if he stood on one side and looked off beyond the garden, he could just make out the chimneys of Wood Hall. His neighbor's property not only abutted his own, but cut a large chunk out of the southwest corner. Wood Hall had been the thorn poking into his side ever since he inherited the earldom. It had done the same to his father and his grandfather before him, and not one of them had managed to convince the Barrett woman who owned the property, and it had always been a Barrett woman, to sell it to them. To make matters worse, the current owner didn't even live in England. She had married and moved to America, renting out the estate. Thom knew the last tenants had left at the beginning of the year, 6 months ago, and no one had touched the place since. He had his men searching for Mrs. Grant, née Barrett, in Boston, the last place she was known to be. He had to hear from them soon. Until then, Thom wondered, would anyone even notice if he just borrowed a few fields? Hell, he'd even rent them, paying the woman a fair price for the use of them, but he didn't know what condition they were in or if they would lose money just making them farmable again. With a low, nearly inaudible growl, he turned away from the window. The two men were still standing there, staring at him. Thom forced a smile onto his face. Don't worry about me, gentlemen. I'll survive for what will surely be only one season. Joseph saw the men out, even as Thom turned back to stare out in the direction of Wood Hall. Thank you for listening.